again, to people who remember me from last time slightly, my name is Hilary Patel. I'm just assisting with community engagement with the central response. Last week, we had a lot of questions. A lot of them were around the building and around the safety of the building. We don't have someone here today. We will have someone here next week about that. And we've answered some of your questions through the bulletin and the newsletter. You should have copies, but if not, please let us know. There is, all of it's available online. In terms of the building, it's just important to remind ourselves that the building was never and has never been at risk of falling down. And it's important that I know it's hard to believe that, but that is the honest truth. And we have done extra work in putting in structural support inside the building to strengthen the core of the building, so that the building, if anyone who has seen buildings collapse in demolitions, etc., buildings tend to collapse down on themselves. And what we have done, just to make sure that we have extra support, because some of the floors have suffered in that because of the heat of the fire. So what we have done is we have put extra metal supports into the building just to make sure that there's extra, to make it extra strong. But we are monitoring that every day. There are workers in that building every day making sure that that is safe and that there is nothing that is going to be structurally unsound with it. Now that does mean that because we're monitoring it, it does mean that we're monitoring it very closely. So if the building moves up to 5 millimeters, that is something that's our threshold, and that is when we will look, and that's why sometimes the building gets evacuated. And then there's a waiting period, and again, to check that. And there are continual monitoring and continual checks to make sure that that building remains as stable as it is now. And as I said, we've made it more stable. And so that is where we are. Promise you, should anything change, we will make that update to you. But that is where we are now with that building, and it is sound. Going forward, we also talked about public health and air quality, and I won't talk about that more because we actually have somebody on the panel who will tell you exactly what we're doing, where the monitors are, where the sensors are, and how you can get more involved in that process and in monitoring that. We had a lot of questions around the fire and everything, and you will appreciate that it's really important to all of us and all of us here that the public investigation and the public inquiry, that nothing happens to hamper that investigation. And as frustrating as that is, what that means is sometimes there's questions we can't answer right now. And that's not because we don't want to answer them, but it's because there's things that we can't risk being taken out of context and being used to hamper the investigation. So we don't have someone here from the fire brigade today. We're working to get them to come back to you. But for right now, we have to let the investigation sort of continue on its path. Which brings me to the next point, which is around covering the building. And many of you asked about why it will take so long to protect that building and to cover it. And there's a couple of just things we have to talk about. And one is, if we put a shield of any kind that covers the windows of the building, that damages the inside conditions of the building. So what that means is the building changes its humidity, and it changes how inside is shaped. And why that's important is because we have to remember that whilst the visible remains of people have been taken out of that building, because of the heat of the fire, there's lots of things in the building that still relate to people. And we need to remember that it's absolutely imperative. This is very delicate. And we need to remember that everything we do, the most important thing we do right now, is that we make sure that people get their loved ones back. And that takes time because of the heat of the fire and the energy the fire created. And so there are things that we cannot do right now. But we are mindful that that doesn't help people who have to look at that building every day, at the building. And so we are looking at other ways that we can protect it. We can't put up scaffolding right now, because scaffolding, although it stands on its own, it has to be bolted to something, especially when it's that high, because the wind and everything else will make that. We do not want scaffolding to fall down and fall on people, or to fall on the building and make the building have more issues. So the only way that we think right now that we can get the scaffolding to stay up is to bolt it into the center of the building. And as soon as we do that, it means that we cannot test the building for how it is structurally sound. The criminal investigation, how that works, is we have to test the building as a building. And so as soon as the criminal investigation is able to get into those rooms that have been cleared, They will test the fire doors, they will test the building as a building. And that, again, sadly, takes time, but it also means that we do not want to change how the building responds, because if we change that, we hamper the investigation. And I know all of that is really frustrating and it's hard for us, but we have to work on a way to try and manage that as best as we can at this process. That's not to say that we've given up on ideas, because we haven't, and we're happy to take more. You know, many minds can maybe find the correct solution to this, and we are still working to try and find a way. At the moment, we still think it will be October, and we know that's a really hard message, but genuinely, it's because we need to make sure the investigation and the collection of our loved ones is done first, and is done in a way that doesn't mess up anything. And that's our primary aim in all of this. And we will, as I said, come back to us, give us your ideas, and I promise we'll investigate every single one. And we've been working every day to look at a way to make this better for people. So I'm sorry that we can't do it faster. Maybe we can in time, but we are working on it. I think that's probably enough of hearing me, because, you know, I'm not your experts today. I think what we will do is we'll invite Councillor Campbell to come, because she also was here and she heard what you said, and I know that the Councillor would like to respond to that, I think. So that's what we'll do next, if that's okay with you, Councillor? Yes, sorry. We have a microphone if you...
Excuse me, can I ask you?
Yes.
Are you experiencing scaffolding? Are you experiencing cranes? There's a 300-ton crane sitting there.
Yeah.
Right? The crane goes in because of the vibration. The scaffolding can't go up because of there's a basement underneath. That's not secure. Why don't you tell these people that's why you can't put the scaffolding up, that's why you can't cover the building up, that's why the 300-tonner is not being set up. I'm in construction, I'm in Westwood, I'm a crane supervisor. Why have you not got a scaffolding firm here answering these questions, a crane supervisor there? To me, you're gibbering on. You're just covering up.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Why have you not got a scaffolding construction firm behind that desk? Just to explain to all these people why it's not covered up. It won't be covered up.
Can we say, no one's disagreeing with you. You're absolutely right. We appreciate that. We appreciate that, and we hear that. And if we need to bring somebody to answer those questions, we will do. We're not professing to be those experts. Sorry, we've brought the panel that we heard people suggest they wanted last week. And this is a continuing conversation. Please do not see this as we know this cannot be the absolute. So please bear with us. We've heard what you've said. We can't do any more on that this evening. We will bring people.